Welcome to Small Town Times. Today I have Chief Scott McLeod Shabagizik from Nipissing First Nation, and we're going to be talking about a number of different issues that are right up there in the forefront of what you're doing. The Metis issue and the Robinson Huron lawsuit for the treaty. What's the word you use?
Annuities.
Annuities, yeah. So tell me what's most important on your mind this week after a glorious Canada Day weekend.
There's a lot. You've touched on a couple. You know, we've got issues with the Métis Nation of Ontario. That's been kind of set aside for now, but it's still something that we're need to work on. There's the recent reaching of a proposed settlement agreement for the annuities case, that is still in the court system and the appeal system. So now that we've reached a tentative agreement, it's got to go back into the courts and get stayed on the basis that we have proposed settlement. Then from there, it'll go to the official signing of the agreement, and from there, there's a distribution model already that's been agreed to by the First Nations of how that money's going to go to the communities. So a lot of stuff. Also, the AFN. There's a lot of shaking up going on there. That annual meeting is coming up in a couple of weeks, actually. I think I've got to head there this Sunday. So yeah, a lot of things going on.
So at the AFN, what I read was there's a proposal to fire the current chief.
So the national chief has already been removed from office. There was a vote last week at a special chiefs assembly, which I attended, and there was, I believe it was around 230 or 40 chiefs in assembly. 71% voted to remove her based on a number of things. But I guess the primary catalyst for that was the HR investigation of alleged complaints for her conduct in the organization with other employees that found to be substantiated, and that had to be dealt with. And so there's a lot of things going on that are concerning that I think the AFN needs to sort out and kind of find their way out of that mess.
So aside from her alleged conduct, were there any political things that she was driving forward that were issues for segments of the Chiefs?
Well, I think there was a number of them, and whether they were real or fabricated is yet to see. There's claims of misappropriation of funds and contracts. There was a call for a forensic audit, which has not been done yet, but there is a resolution. So regardless of the fact that Roseanne Archibald is no longer the national chief, those resolutions are still there. Those are put forward by the chiefs. Mm-hmm. So that work will continue. From what I've seen, and I personally know people that work within the AFN, that work in finance, and there's no real red flags of any kind of corruption that doesn't mean it's not there, and a forensic audit would show that. But usually, a forensic audit is triggered by red flags, and so regardless if the chiefs in assembly want a forensic audit, then let's do it. But it does come with a big price tag, and it does take a fair amount of time to do that. So I think people, and of course there's all the conspiracies out there saying that it's an old boys club and they don't want the friends. The chiefs are the ones that put the resolution forward, not the national chief. She doesn't create resolutions,
Yeah.
right? She pushed the claims that was apparently the case, which the chiefs responded by asking for a forensic audit. But those things takes millions of dollars to conduct and a lots of time to do it. And so, they're looking for the money. They don't just have millions of dollars sitting there not doing anything. So it hasn't been anything other than, they need to find the money to do the forensic audit. It's not, there's people, not saying, oh, no, don't look there because, there's bad things going on. It's just process and
the practicality and what you get
budgeting
out of it. Yeah.
Right.
Because I know that there's often calls for, the city of North Bay to have a forensic audit until they really see what forensic audit costs and what it requires and what it can actually find out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can find other things out with less expense, just reviewing different ways people spent money, right? You don't have to do a forensic audit.
No, exactly. You can look in the regular auditing to find anomalies that would trigger, some more investigation. But in this case, it just seemed to be claims that were put out there. And in this era of conspiracy and, things that are, taking place behind the scenes and transparency and all those things that, since COVID just been kind of going a little bit crazy with, people wanted the forensic audit, they were and if you said anything about it, then you're trying to hide something. But so, the chiefs are like, okay, well, have at it, right? Go ahead. But, now some people are using the fact that it's not being done right away as, aha, we caught you and you don't want to disclose anything. But it's like, no, the chiefs don't have any, control over the financials of the AFN. And neither do I guess the regional chiefs do to some, because they're the board, right? They're the executive to some extent. But I mean, they are given instructions from the chiefs, right? That's how it works. So, but if the money's not there to conduct a forensic audit, we've got to find that money somewhere. But all to say that this whole AFN stuff is just gotten to a real big mess. And I think the takeaway from it, and no disrespect to Roseanne, but when you're dealing, like, even if you took all the HR complaints away, which she was found guilty of in a third-party independent investigation of breaching confidentiality, breaching the whistleblower policy, abuse to staff, and reprisal for anybody who spoke out. All those things have been right. So, but I mean, even if you took that away, even if you remove that out of the picture, does she have the ability to lead the First Nations? And the answer is no. I mean, like, if you're having, in 2 years, you're having votes on confidence of her position and then ousting her, there's obviously some leadership issues even behind all the, the micro detail of the stuff that's going on. So, and now she's launching, this grassroots led coalition of people to come in and somehow demand her be reinstated. So that's what we're looking forward to now in July in Halifax, is just more of the same. And it's been 2 years of like just her managing the chaos that she brings. And the Chiefs, it's nothing about gender. It's nothing about an old boys club. It's about, we have communities that need work done in our communities. We have communities that are literally on fire right now with today's climate. And, we're spending time doing what? It just doesn't make any sense at all. And there may be problems. I can almost guarantee you there are problems in every organization that need to be addressed. But you don't do it with hand grenades and dynamite. You need to be a little more focused on what the issues are and how do you change these things.
Yeah, well, that sounds like politics, and I can understand the frustration of trying to move on. There's a lot of dynamic things happening right now, and there's no time for that, right? Are there a lot of women First Nation chiefs?
Yeah, there are quite a few, and increasing over the time that I've been in politics, which is going on a decade now. This whole thing about gender being a gender issue, or at least that's what Archibald is trying to make this into, is really a red herring. I mean, the motion to remove her and the mover and the seconder were female chiefs. Many female chiefs got up to speak in support of the resolution. But the elephant in the room is that the chiefs, all of us collectively, put her there. Yeah. Like misogyny is already starting to die because we're seeing she didn't get there on her own. Yeah. She was put there by mostly men. If you look at the ratio of men to women in leadership as chiefs, it's mostly men. So, I mean, we put her there. So to turn around and say that that's why she was ousted is it's a red herring. It's not real. I spoke many times at the assembly, and it's like we've already broken that glass ceiling, right? Of having a woman in those positions, and we can do it again. It doesn't mean that we chose the right one the very first time. Everybody has capabilities and certain capacities, and she didn't cut it, and that's too bad. But the reality to all the young women and girls out there is that times are changing, and you can look at positions like that where you'll be accepted to do the job, but you still have to do the right work, and so I see a lot of that just being distractions, smoke and mirrors kind of thing. But the problem is that from that level, from that national level of First Nation organizations to the grassroots people, there's a real breakdown of communication there of what's really going on. The chiefs get to see it firsthand. And when if you ever noticed, her style of communicating is not to the chiefs. She pleads her case to the grassroots. So the grassroots only hear what she's saying, but they're not privy to, the reality of being there and seeing and right. Witnessing and being part of that organization, right? And First Nation people, especially grassroots, they don't, when they hear about conspiracy, corruption, misogyny, they want that weeded out for good reason, because for decades it's been prevalent. But when it's not there, it's a weapon, right? To serve political needs. And unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing happening here. It's kind of ironic, but it's kind of a bit of Trumpism, like how Trump speaks to the base, and it doesn't matter what's actually happening. They believe what he's saying, and it cuts out all
political idealization rather than
yeah.
dogmatic.
So I don't know, make AFN great again. I don't know.
Well, I'm just drawing on my limited knowledge and experience about the AFN, but it's never been a real easy place to be a leader. I'm thinking Kukum, Ovid, Mekredi, like they all had their battles with the chiefs in assembly, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind
Equal
of
opportunity hard.
yeah. We're kind of a victim of our own doing, and we're quick to tell government, we're quick to tell non-Indigenous folk that don't homogenize us. We're not all the same, right? We're different. We're different nations. We have different cultures, languages. We have different ideas. We have different thoughts on things. But then when we get into the Assembly of First Nations, we're all supposed to get along because we're all Indigenous and all supposed to have the same view. And it's a very challenging job for anybody who sits in that national chief position. And so, like, I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to recognize that we're very different, and we come from different histories, and we're going to have different opinions, and so when you get 634 nations or whatever it is across Turtle Island trying to agree on the agenda for the day, right? It's a tough thing to do, right?
Well, that's a good segue into the Métis topic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing, and I always have to preface this because I've been accused of lateral violence and denialism and like you name it, and it's got nothing to do with that. In fact, we're very aware of the history of the Métis people, and maybe that's that's why we're opposing the Métis Nation of Ontario and the government's plan to have them under the self-governing recognized Section 35. Because we know, and not only do we know the history of Métis in Canada, we also know that it didn't happen here. And that's part of the issue that we have. They're using our ancestors, my great grandfather or grandmother, as their root Métis ancestors to claim Métis status. And what we're saying is, well, first of all, there's a difference between a connection to an Indigenous bloodline and a distinctly different culture of people, nation of people. That's a far jump. But when you erase all, the culture, the language, the customs, the ceremony, erase that all and just make a connection to one of our ancestors, well, I mean, that just means congratulations. You have an Indigenous ancestor in your family trees, and you should be proud of that. But it does not make you a distinct culture, a distinct nation in somebody else's territory. And the most ironic part of this whole thing with the MNO is they go to a colonial government to seek that recognition instead of the people whose homelands and territories were here for in excess of 10,000 years. And they're looked to them for that acknowledgement and that, because they're part of them. They're part of the white society that grew up here. So it's an easier avenue to get those recognitions, which is all part of the plan to water down Indigenous rights. And whether they're aware of that or not, but it's just so ironic when you sit back and look at it and try to understand, wrap your head around, okay, how do you see that working, right? And we know more than anybody, it's not about blood quantum. But then if it's not, what is it about? It's about nationhood, right? And blood quantum. your connection blood and your connection through the nation, and there's none of that nationhood here. Where are the archaeological digs of these Métis communities that were supposed to be around here? You know, they just introduced not long ago these four, and I'm not even joking. They call them 4 new historic communities. Well, how can you have a new historic community? I mean, it's an oxymoron. Like it's either new or it's historic, right? And so these are just like newly made up, right? And conveniently all within, you know, the boundary of Ontario, which wasn't around pre-Confederation, right? But that was their homelands. Like it just, you know, fit like a key into a keyhole. You know, the whole thing is kind of ludicrous. And all we're saying is show us your research. You know, if your research is valid and can be argued, then you really don't have a problem. But then they claim lateral violence, they claim denialism when we challenge them on that. But we've produced our own research on that, which shows not only the truth of a lot of the people that they're claiming, which is our people, but it also shows some that they made up, right? Out of, like, they were French from France, and they're being recognized as Métis, right? They're using half breeds, which is now derogatory, but it was really in reference to mixed marriages. Well, mixed marriage doesn't constitute a nation. It doesn't, right? I mean, generations of that, and then, you know, like in the Red River, Manitoba, where generations and generations, and then they kind of established their own culture, their own way of living. That's what a Métis is, right? Not just simply kids from a mixed marriage. Mm-hmm. But that's all the government is requiring of them to prove. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Margaret Froh and Mark Miller, you know, are saying, you know, first of all, like, this is none of your business. And we're like, you're talking about our ancestors. I think it is our business. Yeah. Right. And then, well, it's not going to impact you. Well, it's already impacting us. You know, they're signing impact benefit agreements with mining companies in our territories, getting money. They're getting money from the government to build homes in our territory, while our, you know, communities are like have the worst, you know, records of lack of housing, safe housing, you know, waiting lists, and you know, here we are seeing people that may or may not have, you know, an Indigenous ancestor somewhere in their family tree getting money that should be going to First Nations.
Are there examples of people that have a distant relative in their ancestry from Nipissing First Nation that don't qualify for membership for Nipissing that end up qualified for Métis? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's you know, that's the result of the Indian Act and the 6162. And you know, that has to be fixed. We all agree, and that's why Nipissing, as well as many other communities, are developing their own citizenship law, which will get rid of the Indian Act and put that control back into our communities, so we can determine who is a citizen. Mm-hmm. Because we, like, you know, who other than the Indigenous people should be the ones in charge saying, you know, who the Indigenous people are, right? Not some third party. Mm-hmm. But that's how it's being done currently. And, you know, so are there some that got weeded out over that Indian Act? Absolutely. But it still doesn't make them Métis.
Right. Yep.
Right? I don't know how you go from that to being part of a different nation and part of a different culture. Mm-hmm. Right? Some, unfortunately, were assimilated into mainstream society, where they lived just like that Case guy in Sault Ste. Marie with the MNO. You know, he's talking about whatever, but we looked in his his past, and it goes back to the 1700s or 1600s, where one person had kids with a mixed marriage. They called him half breed. They assimilated, and for the rest of that lineage was all indigenous people, became prominent in the Sault Ste. Marie area, had this energy distribution company in the 1900s. They made tons of money. One of them became the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie. Then all of a sudden, they're Métis, and they're claiming Métis rights in our and that's what we're against. We're not. This is not denialism.
Yeah.
We know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's on the backs and at the expense of the First Nations.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not to get stupid about it, but if your ancestors weren't fiddling and wearing sashes during the 1800s, they likely aren't Métis.
No, and I mean that was a very, I think, it was very geographically focused to that one area in the Manitoba Red River, and for sure, I mean, it did expand, over the years, and there are connections there. But it still makes that the homeland. It still makes that where they originated from.
Yep.
And to suggest that they have claims in our territories is ridiculous.
Yep.
And also that the ancestors were somehow connected to the Métis and the Red River. That like our ancestors are connected to us.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Not over there.
Yeah. It's not a reverse polarity there where you can just.
Yeah. Right. And so we have major issues with the criteria and the research that they've done or didn't do, and we're willing to put ours up against theirs and say, like, look, we're not against giving rights to the or not giving, like they shouldn't be given. First of all, they're inherent, but those people have to be the people that we're talking about here.
Well, it's all about recognition. You can't recognize something that's not there.
Well, exactly, and it's like I said, it's got to have some connection to that nationhood, right? You got what, Irish in you? Mm-hmm. Would you expect to go to Ireland and be able to claim land and rights in Ireland?
No.
Exactly. So why does somebody think that they can do it with Indigenous people?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's that's what we're trying to protect, is the integrity of our nations. Are
there parallels with this particular situation as well with the Algonquin land claim situation?
There are, because again, there are Algonquin people from Pikwakanagan that we recognize. There's other ones that have kind of jumped on the boat when it was leaving the dock, and unfortunately, they're very little connected or not at all connected. And if you don't believe me, you can go look in the public records where they've already, same with M&O, have taken a whole bunch of people off their list because they did not have a connection. But they haven't gone far enough to really scrutinize who are the the rightful people that are have that inherent right to be beneficiaries of that. But we're living in this liberal age of nobody wants to be, well, I don't want to say they're not Indigenous, because that would be racist, or who am I to say? It's just swung the other way. I grew up the only, I didn't ask for a status card. It was issued to me, with a number on it. That's who I was to the government, and now, they're just giving it away. You're right, to anybody who self-proclaims. And, so it's just gone way too far, to the left of things. And, we're on one hand trying to fight, for our rights to self-govern, get that back, because it was assumed jurisdiction away from us, and so that we can create those laws, and we determine who those people are and who they belong to, not some colonial government from Britain to do that work. It's up to us.
Let's pivot over to something that's happened in Nipissing that's maybe more positive as far as what you're proud about.
So if we're talking about the recent case, is that what we were talking about here? Or?
Well, whatever you want.
Oh, actually. Whatever I want. I thought
this
you were
is a softball pitch to you.
I thought you were trying to fish a little bit there, but
I am fishing now.
Well, I mean, the one thing I think as chief of my community, proud to be very active part that I played with our leadership of the 21 First Nations belonging to the Robinson Huron Treaty of 1850. And so we've recently reached a proposed settlement agreement amount for the amount owed for the annuities, and specifically the annuity augmentation clause of the Robinson Huron Treaty of 1850. And it's historical for sure, and I'm proud of that because, I look back and my great grandfather Michel Shabgijic signed the treaty, and here I am, 173 years later. If my quick math is correct,
you're pretty close.
Being the chief in the position to accept the compensation for the wrongdoing that was done to us almost immediately after the ink was dried on the treaty, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of all the chiefs that worked on this, and the litigation team, to get to a proposed $10 billion settlement for our 21 First Nations, which is going to go a long way in helping our communities. But there's challenges with that as well, right? I mean, it creates a whole another set of problems that we have to deal with, and I think, for myself, one of the things that I'm looking at doing is before we start to talk about individual payments for the annuities, we have to understand the history, right? We have to, first of all, understand the true spirit and intent that was proven in court, where we had academic experts, we had elders, we had ceremony, all these things that were never allowed into the court system for the representation of First Nations people. That in itself was groundbreaking. But to hear the expert testimony of some of our elders who have passed on since this case first started, about their knowledge of the treaty and the intentions of our forefathers to protect our nations and our culture is really it's mind-blowing, first of all. But it's not as simplistic as people want to think, right? So I mean, as soon as we announce the 10 billion, you can almost like hear the calculators going off in the First Nations as to how much everybody's going to get, and it's not quite that simple. And I've heard and read remarks on social media about, because I don't know if I'll get into the history in a second, but for the last 160 years, it hasn't changed from $4 a person, right? So and leadership has never taken anything out of the $4 that were given to the individuals, right? So the individuals are saying now, well, why would you take money? Like, this is our money, right? And this is why we have to explain the history, right? And what happened, the wrongdoing, and what this case proved, and how we move forward. So I'll give you the Coles Notes version of how this all happened. So when the treaty was signed in 1850, the amount basically, the colonizers, the government, it would have been the British at the time over here, were basically broke. They didn't have any money. So it was all done on the promise of, as you increase your resources, from the lands, then this augmentation of our annuities would go with that, right? Mm-hmm. So the more you developed this country, the more you would share with us. It was a very simple premise, and fair, right? So for the first few years of that, it started out very low amounts. And then I think it was maybe 10 years after the signing of the treaty, they raised it once, right? The amount, because they were starting to make money, they raised it once, and that amount was always given to the leadership of the communities of the First Nations, and it was based on per capita, but it was a global amount. So what that means is, say if Nipissing had 1,000 people at the time, and the per capita annuity was $4 per person, well, Nipissing would get $4,000, and then what they would do with that money is they would first meet all the needs of the collective. So they would go out and buy, whether it was supplies, salt and flour, and it could be nets, could have been ammunition, took care of the community. And then what was left over was the individual payout. So it might have been $1, in those early times, like equating it to today's monetary value. So it might have been $1 that they each got. Well, that $1 in the first 10 years started to get more. It went to $4. And then the British government stepped in and said, well, we don't trust you and with your ban lists and who's getting this money, so we're going to take it over. So they did, but they just took over paying straight to the individual the $4.
Right.
No global amount.
Right.
To take care of the community needs, it's just straight to the $4, and never changed it for the next 100 and some years, 150 years. They never changed it. And so, we didn't, the leadership over the years never touched it, because it was only $4, and it was not the global amount. It was just to the individual. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know that, you don't know it, right? But that's how it was done. And so what we proved in court was those things, that $4 was never raised. It was based on an individual, not the global per capita amount, mm-hmm. right? To take care. So that's what we want, and that's how our forefathers designed it. Was to take care of the community, the collective, make sure the 7 generations were taken care of. And investing it into the community, and then have the individual payouts to help those families, right? So now that we have this big settlement, I mean, it would be very, very, I think, disrespectful to not follow what they designed for us, mm-hmm. right? Yep. And so that a portion will go to our communities and go for future needs, and then a portion will be an individual payout. Mm-hmm. Right. And what that will look like will come out of conversations with our community members. But to simply say, because I'm alive today, I get everything is just not our way. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame to think that we would actually even contemplate that. So we have to learn these things. We have to learn the history of how our forefathers were thinking and planning for us, and then we have to honor that, We have to honor that and live it, because it's shown in the court case and upheld in the court case that that's how it was done, and that's why that's how we won, and that's how we proved, the illegal action of the British and then Canadian government towards Indigenous people in the treaty. We won.
Yeah.
Right. It's not arguable. So, I mean, flash forwarding now, like, these are the things that we have to, before we start talking about distribution amongst individuals in our community, we need to have that conversation first.
Yeah. Well, from my own perspective and from what I know and what you've been saying here, and I've tried to follow the court case, that concept of community is the strongest part of it, right? And like you say, that concept was proven in court as part of winning this case. And also, it's just a smarter way to do it for a community.
Well, if you just like think for a moment of how a community or a nation survived for 10,000 years in this country, from the time immemorial, you'd be hard pressed to think that we did it individually.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't get a whole lot done individually.
No.
The community is for a reason, because it's just a smarter way to go about things, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
well, no, you got a full plate there, right, buddy?
Yeah, it is. It's challenging, but it's work that I enjoy doing. It's not always rewarding in the public realm, but I think
I heard you got a fan there that was spray painting your name over there by Duchesne. What was that all about?
I'm trying to pinpoint it to what the message is related to, and it's really just a lack of understanding how things work. I mean, if you know about our First Nation, I mean, we're one of the top First Nations in Canada when it comes to financial stability and financial laws in place, preventing any kind of corruption. We're one of the best First Nations across Canada, and we're talked about in these conferences and stuff. And so when you take that and out, you compare also our business laws and all the things that are in place. I mean, lining my pocket. The message said that I was lining pockets with First Nation lands are not for the chief to line his pockets with. I have no idea what that. I don't even get paid overtime for my job. I don't get compensated for overtime. I work all the time, but because my position is a political position, it's based on a 40-hour work week, which I get paid for, and I'm not complaining. But for somebody to accuse me that I'm lining my pockets, it's kind of funny, because I get my chief salary and that's all I get. I could work 80, 90 hours, and sometimes I do, a week, but I get paid 40. And that's just the way it is, because I believe in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this because I'm trying to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I have a business that is actually probably not making as much money as it could because I'm not there. Right. I took on a partner to pick up the slack for the basic reason that I can't be there.
Does that business that you have, does it have like major contracts with the band or something?
No. It's a cabinet manufacturing business, and most of the work is either done with individuals, both non-Indigenous and Indigenous, and so
no major project where
no,
you're doing all the cabinets for all the apartments in
unless they think I built the Duchesne Bridge or something, but I mean,
it is a nice bridge.
Yeah, and then I even heard comments, what is the chief doing? Like, it's a $15 million bridge. That money could be spent doing other things. And it's like, well, we didn't pay for it. We made that much, then that goes into the community, right?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't, that wasn't the net, mind you, that was like gross, right? But, and that's something I'm proud of. We generated revenues, and I think, when you look at the revenues that we're trying to generate, those all equate to sovereignty, to self-governance, right? Because the less we're reliant on the federal government to get funding for whatever, we don't have to report to them. We don't have to justify to them. This is our money. We get to be sovereign. We get to make those decisions ourselves, because it doesn't come with a federal, contract on funding, on how we have to spend it and all those things. So, it's, and I guess, looking back 9 years ago, I've been a chief for 8 years. I had some concerns about, what's being done. But until you get in there, until you get into some of these positions and see how it really is, you never understand, right? The layperson doesn't understand,
you can't know it all from looking from the outside.
No, you see what you see, and that's what right? I joke all the time, to my friends and colleagues that when you're in position of leadership in First Nations, and not just chief, and the way social media is now, is we're bound by a code of conduct. We're bound by ethics. We're bound by confidentiality. And when stuff is like spray painted or posted, on Facebook, people that are not in those positions can post whatever the hell they want, say it, whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
And people in positions like mine
can't defend yourself.
We can't even defend it with the truth half the time because of confidentiality.
Yeah.
So it makes it very awkward and frustrating. But I'm not in it for those, those discussions. I'm in it to leave my mark for my community, and hopefully leave it in a better place than it was when.
Is this your second or third term?
I'm in the
fourth.
I'm in the end of my third term. I'm in the last year of my third 3-year term.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
So there's an election coming.
Yeah. This time next year, almost
Okay.
a year for next year. And so, I don't particularly like elections. I think they're very exhausting and frustrating. But it's something that we have to go through to get who we want to see in these positions.
Are you still interested in running again?
Yeah. So I'm despite what some graffiti people think, I'm very committed to my community, and I've been constantly now for the last probably 6 years been pulled different directions to for leadership reasons. People call them higher levels. I don't think they're higher. I think the highest level is in the community. And I just until I'm comfortable in knowing that the good work is going to continue, I'll stay as long as the community requires me to stay. I'm hoping that there's somebody out there that's thinking about my job, that is willing to put in the honest hard work, and has the thick skin to be able to do the work that I do, and then I'll consider moving on to other things. But right now, my community is always first on my list. Despite a lot of the things that go on at those quote higher levels, the reason I think that community chiefs are really the higher level, and the grassroots even higher than me, because they tell me what to do, right? It's that inverted pyramid. It's not like some of the other government structures where it's a hierarchy. And so I've always maintained, when I was asked to go for different levels of leadership, I said, I don't know if I would be as effective as I am down on the floor on the microphone.
Yep.
And because I think I have the ability to make other leaders think and about what we're doing, and steer it from there. You kind of lose your opinion when you get up on that stage and that podium. And
Who's the regional chief now in Ontario?
The regional chief is Glenn Hare.
Yeah, and he was Grand Council chief.
He was
of
Grand
the
Council
Anishinaabe.
chief of the Anishinaabe.
And he comes from Michigan.
Chiging, yeah.
Michigan.
And
West Bay, Manitoulin.
Yeah. And Reg Niganobi is our Grand Chief of the Anishinaabe Nation.
Yeah. What's he like? I haven't met him yet.
He's a quiet guy. He's good. He was a chief in his community, Mississauga, for I think a couple terms, and so he's there.
I think I met him a long time ago. Yeah.
He's a bright guy, and he's quiet. He's like mild mannered kind of chief, and so he's been there for this is his first term.
Who's the Robinson Huron regional chief?
Well, there is none. They changed that structure.
Oh, did they?
I was the Robinson Huron regional chief for a term, and then the chiefs opted to go into a 4 deputy grand chief model, where each region of the Anishinaabe had their own deputy chief that was assigned to just do right. It wasn't like the one chief representative, community chief. It became a paid political position for the Anishinaabe. Failed miserably.
Well, I can imagine that.
Yeah, and they're supposed to talk about going back to the old structure or a modified hybrid or something, but they didn't have that conversation at the AGA, so I'm not sure what's going on there.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. We only got a little bit more time. What would you like to talk about?
Well, politics are always my favorite topic, so that's always on the agenda.
So what do you think about how it backfired for Ford in the province, making these super city mayors more powerful, and now we got Olivia Chow in Toronto? Did you notice that?
I think I think he really showed it best when he was like one night saying how it was going to be a total disaster if she gets in, and the world's going to come crumbling down, to the next day saying that I gotta work with her, and it was kind of funny. It was like he was like literally eating his words for breakfast.
Yeah, I don't think he's very smart sometimes. What do you think of Pierre and Justin's sort of ball game up in Ottawa?
Oh, I find it,
childish.
Yeah, but I think it's hard to argue intelligently with a child at that level, and I'm nothing against children, of course, but I mean in that context of childish
Immaturity. Really,
immaturity. Well, Polyev is doing. It's just a total play out of the recent political manuals that have been written out of the whole Trump era and the whole what was that movement we had in Canada with the truckers there, the freedom thing, where it's just trying mask right-wing issues with people's emotions and how they're feeling about certain things, and wrap it up and put lipstick on that pig, right? And I always see through that. I mean, like he's been seen talking with these right wing Proud Boy, yellow vest, yellow jacket, or whatever they're called, groups for years now.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's doing it in plain sight. And so, I mean, if that's what people want, it's hard to, but they have to know that that's what they want, right? Because some people don't know what they're voting for. All the, these people with the explicit messages on their trucks about Trudeau, it's like, okay, you don't like him, but like, is it just anybody who's not him that you're willing to support, or somebody that says something about one issue that fits, what you want, that becomes the new leader? Like, this is a very dangerous slope there, and I'm no fan of Trudeau. He's done some things for Indigenous people. Hardly equates to what's been done against us. So there's a lot more work to be done. But I mean, I don't. I'm not a liberal. I'm not an NDP. I'm not. I fight for Indigenous issues and righting wrongs that were done historically, and making our communities better again. And I'll vote for somebody that's going to help me do that. So it's just, politics have just gotten so polarized lately that it's like, if you don't like Pierre Poilievre, then you're a Trudeau supporter. And it's like, well, no, I'm not. Like, I can not like both of them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. But at the end of the day, you have to look and say, okay, like, I don't like Trudeau. I don't like a lot of what he does. But at the end of the day, are my communities safer under that regime than a Pierre Poilievre? And my answer would be, yeah.
Lesser of two evils.
The lesser of two evils, right?
Yeah.
And then the NDP also have a play, like, but unfortunately, the way the political machine is geared, like, you can waste a vote, right? And then be in the position you didn't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the reality of it. And people will say, well, you got to be true to your political beliefs. That may be true, but at the end of the day, when it means bulldozers coming through our communities, you think differently.
Yep.
Right. And that's the reality for Indigenous people in this country, right? Who have, a whole Canadian law system that's, stacked against them. Right. And it's crippling for our communities. And, so we try to navigate our way out of that as best we can. The way we vote is not the way most people vote. Right. A lot of people vote, well, my grandfather was a conservative and his grandfather was like, well, mine wasn't, and so we have a different lens of looking at Canadian politics. People say, even some of our people say, well, you shouldn't vote in that foreign system. And I'm like, well, I have to, because, I'm trying to get us out of that system. And from underneath, all that colonial web, and the only mechanism we have right now is that.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, you're stuck with an illogical electoral system that doesn't seem to be changing with the times. Either you're relevant as a player or you're not, right? So I think the Canadian conservatives that are following the Trumpism script and figuring popularity, a populist sort of leader is the way to go, and to sort of...
Exactly.
They should skip to the now, which is the end of that book, where the Republicans are realizing that Trump has a populist sort of following that doesn't have any logical basis, and that makes all its decisions based on what one individual says. And they can't even get, I forget the guy's name, but he's been introduced, and he's the top guy in that state. He gets booed off the stage, and he's supporting Trump just because Trump might not like him, right? So Pierre Poilievre and those guys really should skip to the end and find out that where they're heading.
Well, they
is
can
not
just
gonna work.
look at Mussolini and how he.
Well, there's other examples. Yes, there's a lot of examples. When you're promoting individualism and independent freedoms, as everybody can skip out on the whole community-oriented collective, the whole idea, your whole your social contract as a nation. That's where are you heading? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah.
No, it's a crazy time in politics around the world, like that. That whole kind of populism again spread to other countries. It wasn't just recently in the States, but I think if you look back in history too, though, that's essentially how a lot of things started. Whether not to draw a complete comparison of what's going on now, but I mean, when you look back at Hitler's rise to power in the late 1920s and into the 1930s, a lot of that was, it's all about people being, in the right time, the right environment, the right attitude of people, all that mixing together, does some crazy things in this, this cycle.
Well, America almost became part of the Axel. They were pretty close to being supporters of Germany. Like it wasn't that far off. They had all the elements and for that recipe, and there was a big movement in behind the scenes. That's why they were delayed getting into the war, right? Like they were split.
Well, things were good in the States.
Yeah.
Why did they want to go and fight? What they thought was Britain's war, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they kind of got pulled into it by Japan, and and then
there's a lot of support for Russia right now out of the States too. So
it's
they teeter on that line there. That's so dangerous.
Yeah. Constant struggle.
Yeah. So after a year of Marathon Beach being renamed to Schaubel Beach, how are you feeling about it?
Good. I mean, to me, it's one of those things that should happen. I mean, if people really want to be proud and honest with themselves about this country, I think like denying, those important people and important historical events in this country don't help. I think we're all over the fact that history didn't start in the 1600s here. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy that I was part of that and got to see it happen. And I think just more of that should happen, and maybe it shouldn't be such a big deal. Maybe it should be just the right thing to do, right? I tell that to my non-Indigenous counterparts in government, and we sign agreements or we reach settlements, and it's a lot of it is not, it's not a time to celebrate that we reach some amazing accomplishment. We're just doing what's right. Like, why can't we just do that? Why do we need to have a big spectacle about these things, right? I look at things differently. Even this annuities case or any other one, the compensation doesn't really cover the cost of what was taken, right? It's a fraction. and so if you think of it that way and think, okay, 10 years ago, Dave Dale stole my car, and today he's bringing back the tires, and is that cause for celebration? I'm only getting part of the car back 10 years later, so that's how I see these things, right?
Yep.
And we should just be doing it out of good conscience and knowing that we're all good people, and there's some bad things that happen. Let's fix those, right? I know maybe that's just a pipe dream, but that's kind of how I think of these things, and that's why I don't get all embroiled with these, big handshaking ceremonies. I've missed a few of them because I have work to do. I've got other things that I want to get off my list while I'm in this position of leadership. So yeah, that I'll let history speak for itself when they look back and see what I did. Right, I want to do as much as I can during that time period.
Excellent. Well, when the city's celebrating its 2025 100th anniversary, I'm hoping there's a historian there that understands that and makes some remarks to it, that the 1925 incorporation of the city was 75 years after the 1850 treaty set up a situation where they had territory to move into and develop and bring railroads through. Not that it was ever done properly with the right agreements and whatnot, but there would be no North Bay without the 1850 treaty setting up that development.
Well, there would be no North Bay either if they didn't arbitrarily move the boundaries on the land set aside for Indians and switched all the measurement units from leagues to miles, reducing the land and allowing North Bay to set up where they did.
Oh, is that how it happened?
Yeah.
Where North Bay sits, it was supposed to be reserved?
Yeah, and Sturgeon Falls.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just think of it like very logically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been living on these lands. We know the important places of the territory. The rivers were our highways. That's where we did our trading and, met other nations. So to think that, we were just going to take the swampland between, the Sturgeon River and La Baz, Descheny River Creek, is just like, we wouldn't do that.
Well, I knew about the different measurement change after kind of following a bit of a case for reserve lands on the north side, but I didn't realize it affected the lands that should have been Nipissing First Nation on the North Bay side. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So how was that resolved? Was that settled?
So the 2013 boundary claim was resolved with Canada.
Okay.
Right. So we received the compensation again. We got the tires from the stolen car, which is $124 million from Canada. But Canada didn't have land; they just had the money.
Right.
Right. So we settled with Canada. So we're currently in negotiations with Ontario now to talk about the land.
Oh.
Right. And so that's going well. The Ontario government, I think, is more willing to cooperate and to resolve these issues as they were, back in 2013, which they didn't come to the table. Now they're at the table and we're negotiating settlement of lands. We're hoping to potentially increase our land base out of this. So yeah, that's what we're doing now. I can't speak too much of it because it's
sure,
it's things that are happening as we speak. But that's in a nutshell. We're looking to resolve that, and both parties are committed.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll change how I describe that to people then, because I had looked at it a little bit different. But that's cool. That's more knowledge is better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a rule that applies to just about everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks a lot for coming in and
My pleasure.
talking. You've been my most regular guest over the last 4 or 5 years that I've been doing these things. And finally in a pretty decent studio with some better equipment. So we're moving on up.
Yeah, it's a little more comfortable. I think we were sitting on some bar stools or something.
Yeah,
one
well,
time.
that kept the conversation short. Anyways, I'll cut her off there, and we'll talk again whenever we need to.
Anytime, Dave. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott.